Hi friends, it's Amy from Amy Rooney Designs. Today with another sewing tutorial. Today I'm going to walk you through how to make this super summery popsicle mug rug. I love mug rugs, especially in the summertime, to keep your sweaty drinks from leaving rings everywhere. Plus they're a super fun pop of color, they're easy to mail so they make great gifts, and they're just really fun to have around. I am going to show you all of the steps from start to finish and how to make this. The pattern for the popsicle is available on my blog to newsletter subscribers. It's part of my summer sewing series where each week I share a new fun project to help keep you creative through the summer. They're meant to be done in short periods of time, whether it's a hot afternoon where you're trying to stay cool or something that you can just fit in between going to the pool and working in the garden. They help keep your creative juices flowing and they're all really fun. I hope you'll join us. You can sign up on the blog. The patterns come out the month of June every Wednesday, but if you're signing up late after June, not to worry. Still head to the blog post in the description below and you'll get all of the emails with the patterns sent straight to your mailbox, spread out a day at a time so that you're not overwhelmed, but you can still catch up on all of the fun projects that we've been doing on this summer sewing series. If you are new to raw edge applique, or if you're new to binding, I have more in-depth descriptions and video tutorials than what I am going to share in this video today. I will link to those below so that you can have all of the information that you need to be super successful with both raw edge applique and binding, especially on small projects like this. I share all my tips and tricks so that you can move forward with confidence and don't feel like you have to be intimidated by any step in this project. It's all really fun, straightforward, and hopefully will get you excited about applique, quilting, and all of the fun things that come with sewing and being creative. As always, if you like this video, I would love to have you subscribe to my channel, to like and comment on this video, and to share it with others if you have found it helpful and fun. As for now, let's get sewing. To begin, we are going to cut out all of our fabrics and things that we need to create our mug rug. The first thing that you will need is the back of your mug rug, and all of the dimensions for the size of the pieces that you will need are found on the blog post linked below, and it will also be on the PDF that comes if you are signed up for the summer sewing series. The next thing that you will need is a piece of batting. You could use felt or fusible fleece for this if you happen to have that on hand instead of batting. But if you have batting on hand, this is a fantastic way to use up scraps. You'll need a piece of fabric that will be the background for your applique, and then you will need your two border pieces, 2 of each, to create the border around your applique. You will also need 1 2-inch or 2 1/4 inch wide by width of fabric pieces for your binding once we get to the end. Some other supplies that you are going to need are basting spray if you want, or pins to baste together your layers once your quilt top is done, your mug rug top is done. And you will also need some fusible adhesive. So I am using Heat and Bond Light. I really prefer a kind that you can stitch around, mostly because I like the look of it. I also like to be able to add my quilting either through it or around it to be able to add some extra dimension to my mug rug. So I strongly recommend a sewable version, but you can totally do a non-sewable one if you want. Just make sure that if you are using a version that cannot be sewn through, that when you go to do your quilting and all of that stuff, that you do not sew through a non-sewable fusible adhesive. It will make your machine not happy with you. Okay, once we have all our pieces cut, we are ready to create our applique. So you will begin by taking your fusible adhesive. You will trace the pattern for the popsicle onto the paper side of your adhesive. Now on this mug rug pattern, I am calling for 3 different popsicles. So you will trace the outside, you will trace the shadow, and you will trace the popsicle stick each 3 times. It's best if you have your pieces separate from each other. Well, you need to have them separate from each other in order to be able to cut out individually all of the pieces. So once you have them all traced, then you are going to cut around each individual pattern piece, leaving a margin of space around the edge from your drawn line. Now, when you have two pieces that are going to go onto the exact same fabric, you can leave them grouped together. You don't have to cut each individual piece. Just make sure, again, that you're leaving that border around the outer edge here. Then you are going to take your fusible adhesive and you're going to have the paper side up and you're going to place it on top of the wrong side of your fabric. So this one is the easiest one to tell. So this is the right side, this is the wrong side, and this is the paper side of my adhesive facing up. And then you are going to follow the instructions of the manufacturer on the package of whatever adhesive you're using, and you are going to fuse it to the back side of your fabrics for each color. So I have my popsicle, I have my shadow, I have my popsicle stick here. The next thing that you will do is take a good pair of scissors and you're going to cut out each of those pieces right on your drawn or traced line here. Once you have them all cut out, then we are going to start positioning them onto our background piece of fabric. So this is the smaller of the pieces, and this is where our raw edge applique is going to go. As we position these in place, you want to keep in mind that you need to leave at least a ½ inch of border around the edges of your fabric to make sure that you're accounting for seam allowances once we go to add the borders around our background piece here. So make sure you keep that in mind as you're positioning these. So I have done it on this one. I have all of my popsicles going straight up and down, which I really like the symmetrical look of that. If that's what you're doing, then I do have the measurements on the pattern piece for exactly where you will position them. And what I like to do is I start with the popsicle sticks. So you begin by, sorry, that stuck to my finger, by peeling off the paper backing of each of your pieces as you go to position them. So I have already peeled the paper off of the back of this one, and you can see that it's shiny there, and that is the adhesive that is on the wrong side here. So we're going to position our first one at 3 3/4 inch from the side. And this is going to put it right in the center. And again, I have measured up a ½ inch so that I know I'm not going to put anything over the edge of my ruler because I want it to be in line. And then I would go through and I would position my other two popsicle sticks. They are going to go in 1 3/4 from each side. I will fuse those in place and then I will come back to the other side. I'm going to again put my ruler here and then I will just again peel off my paper backing and then I will center it on top. Now the reason that I fuse my popsicle sticks in place is so that as I go to move around my popsicle body, I'm not adjusting the position of that popsicle stick. And that way I know that it stays right where I want it to. Now, if you don't want yours going straight up and down, you can obviously just tilt them and have them go, you know, whichever directions that you want. But again, you just want to make sure as you are positioning them that you are going around and measuring and making sure you have at least a ½ inch on all of the sides to assure that you are not going to have your popsicles bleeding off into your seam allowances. So once you have them positioned how you want, you will fuse them into place. Again, make sure that you reference the manufacturer's instructions for that so that your iron is set to the right temperature and you're giving it the right amount of time. And then once you have them all fused into place, now you have an option. You can, at that point, go through and sew down, see if I can show you all the stitching there, sew down each of the pieces and have that, that stitching already finished before you add the borders. Or you can wait and do the stitching around each of the pieces once you have added your borders and in the quilting step. Now, if you wait to do it in the quilting step, it's going to give a little bit of a different texture to your popsicles than if you have done it beforehand. So in this case, I have quilted all the way through them, and that kind of makes the popsicles kind of blend in with the same fabric. If I had quilted around the edges of these and not actually quilted through my popsicles, then the popsicles would have a little bit of a more raised look to them. And there's no right or wrong there. It's totally a matter of preference. Also, I wanted to point out one thing really quickly on these rainbow popsicles. Because this dotted background is so bold and the polka dots, you can see them kind of shadowing through through the stripes here on this rainbow popsicle. If you want to prevent that from happening, my recommendation is that you use some medium weight interfacing on your fabric before you add your fusible adhesive. And that way it will give you just an extra layer there, and it will help to really diminish that shadowing a lot. If you don't mind it, it's totally fine. It doesn't impact anything, but sometimes it can bother people if you can see those little dots poking through there. So remedy that by using a medium weight interfacing, which if you're doing our summer sewing series, you had some for the wallets, the mini wallets that we made. It's that same fusible medium weight interfacing. And you could even use a light interfacing if you don't want the stiffness of it. Either way will add an extra layer and help you prevent some of that shadowing. Another option is to fuse this piece of fabric with a white piece of fabric, and then add another layer of fusible. So you have 2 layers of fusible adhesive, 2 layers of fabric. It will add a little bit more stiffness to the popsicle itself, but it will prevent that shadowing. So those are some options for you if that's something that you're running into. What I intend to do is I'm going to actually stitch around these popsicles using a black thread. And I think that that will add a nice definition to those popsicles and help kind of diminish the appearance of that shadowing a little bit. But it doesn't really bother me that much either, because I feel like it kind of mimics the seeds on the watermelon and stuff. So I kind of like the look of it. It doesn't bother me. All right. So once you have decided if you are going to sew or not sew your applique, you will sew your applique at one point or another. You either sew it before you add the borders or you sew it during the quilting. But either way, you will want to make sure that each piece of your applique gets stitched down. The next thing is to add your borders. So I like to begin by sewing the top borders on, the longer borders. I just find it's easier to work with, keep my lengths as short as I can. So you are just going to place the top piece right sides together, and then you are going to sew along this edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You will press your border fabric away from your center fabric. And I like to have the seam allowances going towards the border fabric, especially because in most of these cases, I would imagine that you are using a lighter background so that your popsicles really stand out. And that means that your border is going to be a darker fabric. So press towards the darker fabric, which in this case is going to be your border. Once you have those 2 borders on, then you are going to add your next 2 side borders. So again, you will just line it up here. So you're going to put it right sides together. Again, you will sew down using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then press your border away from your applique center. Now, as you are positioning these, you may want to pay attention if you have large motifs or whatever. If you want to turn it the other way so that they're going a certain direction, that might be something you want to pay attention to at this point. Once you have your border sewn on, we'll come right back here and we'll work on making our quilt sandwich. Now that we have our top all the way put together with our borders and everything, then we're ready to make our quilt sandwich. Now, a quilt sandwich consists of your front of your quilted project, so in this case our mug rug, your batting or felt or whatever you're using to make it fluffy and nice, and the back of your project. So what I prefer to do, especially on small projects like this, is I will take just a piece of scrap paper or packing paper or something to protect my surface, and then I will take this basting adhesive or any kind of spray basting adhesive. I just find that with a small project like this, it's just really nice to keep all the layers really tightly bound together. So I will take my backing fabric and lay it down. Want to make sure that there's no strings or wrinkles or anything on there. And then I will take my basting adhesive and I will just spray a light coat on that. And then I will place my batting on that. Again, you want to make sure that there's no lint or strings or anything as much as possible. And I'm going to kind of center this on my backing fabric. Then I will add a second light coat of my basting adhesive. And again, you just want to make sure that you're getting to the corners, but you don't want to put a ton on here because it may gunk up your needle just a hair. I mean, I haven't had any problems. I have done a ton of these, but you know, less is better if you can get away with it. And then you'll place your top on there. You want to make sure it's all smoothed out and there's no wrinkles on there. And then you are ready to take this to your machine and add the quilting however you like. Once you have done that, it's going to look like this one. So you'll see that my edges get a little bit wonky as I'm quilting, and I wanted to show you the difference on this one, which has the quilting done through the popsicles, but just around the pieces to sew that down. And the difference of how that looks versus this version where I have quilted through all of it, and I went ahead and sewed down all of my applique pieces beforehand. So I think that, you know, they're both great looks and I like them both. It's just totally a matter of preference. Once you have this all the way quilted, and you want to make sure that you're quilting close enough to your edges here that when you go to add your binding and stuff, that everything is securely, you know, secure and gonna stick together really well. Then you're going to trim up your mug rug. So I have created this pattern so that you will finish with about a 6.5 by 9.5 inch piece here. And then we're going to trim it down to 6 inches high by 9 inches wide. And that is a totally made up number that I just did, but it creates a mug rug the size that I like. You are absolutely welcome to make it bigger or smaller, you know. There is no like legal size for mug rugs as far as I'm concerned. So you're going to take, what I will do is I usually just take a ruler, and for this pattern, I will measure 1 inch away from my center, you know, block here to create a border that is 1 inch wide. So I will take my ruler and I will line up this 1 inch mark with that seam right there, and then I will take my rotary blade and I will trim off that edge, and then I will do the same. But I also like to use my cutting mat with a grid on it to help me make sure that they're staying square and things like that. So I will line up my cut edge with another cut edge to make sure that I am keeping these lines parallel to each other, you know, the lines at the top and the bottom and the lines on the side, that they are all squared up. And then even all the way around. And then you'll end up with a mug rug that looks like this. And then all that's left is just to add your binding. So my preference, and again, as I mentioned at the beginning, there is an entire video series on how to add binding to these projects. But I just wanted to share a couple of tips when you're working with a small project like a mug rug. So what I like to do is just fold over the end of my binding and press it before I press my binding in half. And then I will start at the bottom left corner, either on the bottom side or on the left side here, and I will start sewing around. And I just attach this at my machine. I don't pin it first or anything, but that is totally a preference. Again, there is no right or wrong. You can use your favorite binding method for this. But when I have gone all the way around and I come back to this point, then what I will do, so we're just gonna pretend here that this is all sewn down. And then what I would do is I'm going to make sure that these ends overlap by about 1 inch. I will trim off this end of my binding, and then I will stick it inside this side of my binding and then sew them down along the edge just like that. So I do not sew these two pieces together here. There's enough of an overlap, and this is already in finished edge, that I don't need to do that. And that's something I do a little bit different in a mug rug like this versus a bigger project like even a mini quilt or a larger size quilt. I would normally sew those two pieces together. But when you're working with a small project like this, you just don't have as much real estate to mess with your binding and stuff, and this works just as well. So once I have that sewn down, then again, I will flip this all over to the other side and sew them down. And again, with mug rugs, I tend to machine stitch my binding down, which is also different than what I normally do with larger projects. But I just find that they're faster, and I feel like the binding stays in place really well. And this is a project that I anticipate getting washed frequently. You know, you're going to put drinks and snacks on it and stuff, so you may need to wash it a few times. So I want to make sure that it is sewn down really well. So what I will do is I am sewing this down is I will fold over the end, and then I stitch along this side of it here, and it will catch the back side of it there. So you just want to make sure that as you're going around, you are catching that seam here as you make all of those corners. So those are my tips for adding the binding to these. And once your binding is on, then you're all done. It's all set. You can hit this with an iron really quick if you're finding that some of your corners are curling a little bit or whatever. But other than that, it's finished. It's a super fun, quick, fast project. I have lots more mug rug patterns and raw edge applique patterns in my Etsy shop and also on my blog. If you have enjoyed this project, I hope you'll take a peek at those. And until I see you next time, happy sewing, my friends.